Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're in the heart of a world built on steel, smoke and quiet endurance. Stalin's Soviet Union, where factories thunder from dawn to dusk, and ordinary workers move through endless corridors of metal and expectation. You're not a hero of the state or a celebrated comrade, just another pair of hands caught in the machinery of the 5-year plan. Before we start, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you'd prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet and designed, so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair, plus other sleep tools, in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You wake before the sun, though you never planned to. You simply open your eyes to a room that offers no reason to stay asleep. The ceiling above you is a flat grey surface, faintly cracked in places where the paint has curled like tired paper. The air is cold but not refreshing. It carries a thin mixture of dust, laundry starch, and something older, something like the ghost of a dream you aren't sure you had. You breathe it in slowly, the way you always do, as if testing whether the morning has changed. It hasn't. The blanket covering you is coarse, woven from fabric that feels sturdy enough to last decades but somehow manages to fray at the edges anyway. Your skin has learned its texture. You no longer expect softness in the first moment of waking. Softness is a luxury reserved for people who do not need to wake this early, who sleep in apartments where windows face courtyards instead of alley walls, where mornings don't arrive with such a heavy sense of duty. You sit up, and the floor greets your feet with a chill that travels up your bones like a slow reminder of the world you live in. The boards beneath you never creak, not because they are well made, but because they gave up complaining years ago. The room is simple: a bed, a small table that leans slightly to the left, a dented metal cup on the windowsill, and a wardrobe with a door that never closes completely. Every object around you feels like a co-worker, overworked, under-repaired, and still somehow expected to endure. Through the window, the city waits. The glass has a thin film of frost on the inside, and when you exhale, your breath leaves a small cloud that fades without meaning. The sky beyond is a quiet, muted blue, the kind that never fully becomes daylight, even at noon. You can see the outline of the factory chimneys, already releasing thin trails of smoke. They start early, even earlier than you. It's comforting in a strange way, like knowing someone else is already tired before you've begun. You stand and dress methodically, pulling on the same set of work clothes you folded last night without much thought. The shirt is stiff from drying near the radiator, which sputtered through the night in disconnected bursts of heat. The trousers smell faintly of metal and old soap. You button each part of your uniform with the slow precision of someone who has done this more times than they could ever count. There is no rush, there is also no choice. The rhythm carries you from one movement to the next, the way a conveyor belt nudges pieces along, whether they're ready or not. Your boots wait near the door, scuffed and worn, but still functional. You slip into them and feel the subtle resistance of leather, stretched to its limits. They are loyal in the way objects become loyal when they've seen every step you've taken for years. A thin layer of dust coats their edges. Everything seems to gather dust here, as if the city itself is trying to wrap its residents in a soft uniform grey. The hallway outside your room smells faintly of boiled potatoes, even at this hour. It's a smell that never leaves the building. You walk quietly, though no one is asleep. They simply lie still until their alarms or instincts force them up. Doors open and close softly along the corridor. You and your neighbours share the same practiced silence, a courtesy born not from politeness, but from fatigue. Words feel heavier in the morning. Lifting them seems unnecessary. The stairwell echoes with hollow steps that stack on one another like unfinished sentences. Outside, the air greets you with a dry cold that sits on your skin but doesn't quite seep in. You know it will later. It always does. The street is dim, washed in a pale bluish-grey light that makes the buildings look taller and the shadows longer. The city isn't asleep. It simply hasn't put on its expression yet. You walk with slow, steady steps along the pavement, avoiding the patches of ice that glint faintly under street lamps. Along the walls, faded posters remind you of goals set somewhere far away. The 5-year plan is printed in thick, confident letters you see every day, though the ink has begun to peel at the corners like a story that's been told too often. Each poster shows a smiling worker with perfect posture and a gaze that looks straight into the future. You find yourself wondering, as you do most mornings, if anyone has ever stood like that in real life. You never have. People pass around you in quiet procession. Their breaths leave faint trails in the cold, rising and fading like thin signals of life. No one hurries. Hurrying implies you believe time can be controlled. Everyone walks with the same uniform pace, the same resigned awareness that the factory will open its gates, whether you arrive early or late. The machine has patience. It waits without caring. You step into the main street, and the wind carries the scent of coal smoke, metal dust, and bread baking somewhere in the distance. The combination should be unpleasant, but you've grown used to it. It's the smell of a city built not for comfort but for endurance. A city that thrives on repetition. A city that knows every footstep you will take today, long before you take it. Your breath comes out in slow, steady clouds as you continue walking, each exhale spreading into the cold air like a small offering. The sky brightens by degrees, never fully deciding to become morning. The light spreads evenly, without warmth, coating everything in a thin layer of clarity that feels more administrative than natural. You look around and see people moving in parallel lines, each of them heading toward factories, offices, workshops, and queues they did not choose. It's not that anyone expects joy at this hour. Joy isn't on the schedule, but there is a quiet acceptance in the way everyone moves. A sense that the day is not something to conquer, only something to survive. You feel it in yourself too, that muted acknowledgement of routine, the understanding that your biggest accomplishment today will be making it through without breaking the rhythm. As you turn the corner, you see the distant outline of the factory complex. The chimneys stand tall against the pale sky, steady and indifferent. You feel a soft heaviness settle in your chest. Not dread exactly, but something close to the weight of an unchanging fact. It presses lightly, the way a hand might rest on your shoulder to remind you that you're expected somewhere. The road beneath your feet vibrates faintly with the early rumble of machinery. You can hear the repetitive clank of metal on metal echoing from within the sprawling buildings, as if the machines have begun their day without waiting for you. They often do. They don't require your presence to feel alive. They operate with a kind of mechanical confidence that borders on arrogance. You keep walking, your boots brushing against patches of gravel, your breath forming small clouds, your thoughts drifting in and out like slow-moving smoke. The city behind you grows quieter with distance, and the factory ahead grows louder with purpose. Somewhere above, the sky shifts from grey-blue to a brighter shade of resignation, and you walk toward it, steady and silent, carrying the same feeling you carry every morning. That small, replaceable part of yourself, the machinery expects you to deliver. You continue forward, letting the city fold around you in its steady grey rhythm. The morning has settled now, not quite brighter, but more awake, as though the buildings themselves have inhaled and remembered their shape. The cold hangs in the air without urgency. It doesn't sting or bite. It simply rests on your cheeks, a constant reminder that warmth is something earned, not given. The street ahead stretches in a long, straight line, bordered by concrete blocks that mimic each other, with such precision they seem copied from a tired blueprint. Their walls are plain, their corners blunt, their windows arranged with the mathematical confidence of a system that values order above beauty. You walk between them like a small figure, moving through a set designed for efficiency rather than comfort. The pavement is patched in places, rough in others, and always slightly damp, as though the city has been sweating through the night. Above the doorways and along the walls, slogans stare down with broad, firm lettering. They do not inspire you, they observe you. The faces printed on the posters smile with the sharp clarity of people who never wake up cold. Their eyes follow you with the patience of ideals you can't argue with, because they don't actually speak. You simply feel them watching, their messages echoing faintly in your mind, with the tone of someone reminding you to straighten your posture, even when no one else is looking. The air carries the scent of wet concrete, mixed with the metallic hint of faraway machinery. Occasionally, a window opens somewhere above you, and a thin stream of warm air drifts out, carrying the smell of boiled cabbage or soap powder. These scents settle gently over the street before fading, absorbed by the wide emptiness of the morning. People walk beside you, behind you, and ahead of you, all moving in the same calm procession. No one hurries, no one falls behind. The city has shaped its residents into a quiet river of footsteps, each person flowing forward without needing direction. Their coats hang heavy on their shoulders, their scarves wrapped tightly at their throats. Their faces calm in the way faces become when emotion is far less efficient than routine. You pass a man adjusting his cap, pulling it low against the cold. A woman walks with two children, each wearing coats slightly too big for their frames. The children move with small, steady steps, already learning the rhythm of a place that offers very little softness. Their breath forms tiny clouds that drift upward, dissolving before they reach the height of the slogans watching from the walls. A tram rattles nearby, groaning as it moves along its track. The sound is steady, mechanical, and strangely comforting, like a companion who never changes tone. You hear the faint scrape of metal on metal, the soft ringing of a bell that signals nothing in particular, the dull murmur of passengers inside, shifting from foot to foot. The tram continues forward with the determination of something built to work regardless of the weather, the hour, or the thoughts of the people inside it. Your boots tap the pavement with soft rhythmic thuds, the same sound repeated block after block. Occasionally, your heel catches a loose stone, sending a small scrape echoing ahead of you. It's the only unpredictable sound in your path, and even it feels rehearsed, as though the city expects such tiny disruptions and waits patiently for them to finish. As you move farther, the buildings grow taller, casting long shadows that blend with the morning light. The grey walls reflect faint patches of sky, giving everything a washed-out glow. It's a place built not to impress, but to last. Each structure looks like it could survive a century without ever asking for maintenance, though you suspect they won't be given a choice. A faint draft weaves its way along the street, slipping past your collar and settling against your neck. It carries the distant murmurs of radio broadcasts leaking from open windows, voices speaking with careful enthusiasm, reading announcements prepared by people who probably never step outside in the early morning cold. The tone is always the same, measured, confident, certain. Words about production, unity, goals, and progress glide across the air as easily as smoke. You listen without listening, the way one listens to rain tapping on a roof. It fills the silence without offering anything more than presence. A truck rumbles past you, its engine sputtering in uneven bursts. The bed is empty, though dust clings to its wooden slats. The driver doesn't glance your way. He stares ahead, hands gripping the wheel with tired familiarity, as though steering the truck is merely an extension of breathing. The vehicle leaves a thin trail of exhaust that lingers in the air, settling briefly on your coat before the wind thins it out. You step around a puddle that reflects the factory chimneys in distorted shapes. The water is murky, the surface rippled from recent footsteps. For a moment, the reflection resembles dark pillars rising from a clouded sky, a quiet reminder of where you're heading and what waits for you beyond the next corner. Your path leads you past a small square with a few leafless trees standing like thin lines of charcoal drawn onto a page. Their branches reach upward in stiff, brittle angles, as if uncertain of their purpose. The ground beneath them is bare, covered in a mixture of frozen soil and old footprints. A bench sits nearby, its metal frame cold and its wooden slats warped by seasons of indifferent weather. No one sits there in the mornings. The seat seems designed more for appearances than comfort, another gesture toward a softness the city never truly intends to provide. You pass a man sweeping the sidewalk in slow arcs, his broom making dull brushing sounds against the rough concrete. He moves with no urgency, his motion steady and unchanging. Bits of gravel and dust gather in small piles that the wind will probably scatter again within the hour. It doesn't seem to bother him. Tasks here are not measured by results so much as completion. If something is done, it is done. What happens after is not on the list of responsibilities. Further ahead, a woman stands beside a newspaper board, pinning up the latest issue with numb fingers. The pages flap gently in the breeze until they settle, their headlines bold and optimistic. The ink glistens faintly. You glance at the words without absorbing them, recognizing the familiar tone before the content, promises of growth, strength, and certainty. You've learned to read them the same way one reads the weather, an observation, not an influence. The street bends slightly, leading you toward the industrial quarter. The air thickens with the smell of coal and hot metal even before you see the buildings. The change happens gradually, like stepping from one room into another without noticing the doorway. You feel the shift more than you see it, a subtle tightening of the atmosphere, a heaviness that settles around your shoulders, as if reminding you to prepare yourself. Your footsteps slow, not from reluctance, but from the slight incline of the road. The pavement is cracked in places, the edges crumbling under years of foot traffic and neglect. Each step sends a faint vibration up your legs, connecting you to the ground in a way that feels both grounding and burdensome. Ahead, the factory walls rise into view. They stretch wide, built from dark stone and reinforced concrete, giving the impression of a fortress that long ago forgot it was supposed to protect something. The windows are narrow and fogged from within, illuminated by a dull glow that hints at the restless machines inside. Smoke rolls from the chimneys in thick, slow-moving plumes, drifting across the sky in shades of grey. You walk toward them, drawn not by choice but by the unspoken rhythm that guides every resident of this city. The cold air thins, the ground vibrates faintly, the world narrows into a corridor of stone and smoke, carrying you forward, step by step, toward work that does not wait for anyone, not even you. The closer you move toward the industrial courtyard, the more the city seems to quiet itself, as though sound grows cautious here. Footsteps soften, conversations thin out into murmurs. Even the wind lowers its voice. The air carries the scent of heated metal, drifting in slow spirals. From the foundry chimneys that carve long trails into the pale sky, you follow the curve of the road until the factory gates come into view, standing tall and unmoved, their iron bars darkened by years of weather and uncounted mornings, just like this one. A crowd forms around you, emerging from every direction, with a practiced coordination that needs no instruction. Hundreds of workers gather, their coats brushing against yours, their hats pulled low, their breaths rising in even clouds that dissolve almost before they form. Everyone walks with a measured rhythm, the kind that settles into bones over time, the kind that feels less like choice and more like gravity. The ground beneath all of you dictates the pace, Steady, uniform, unhurried, as if it has spent decades training every footstep to match its expectation. You feel the movement ripple through the crowd, a gentle push forward as bodies lean toward the entrance. The gates loom ahead, not imposing in an emotional way, but in a mechanical one. They stand as part of the architecture of routine, tall and plain, built from thick metal that never rusts enough to matter. Their hinges creak softly as they begin to open, not welcoming you, but simply shifting, because it is time. The sound is tired, but the motion is smooth, like a habit even the metal can't unlearn. The gates don't look at you. They don't hold meaning. They are functional, nothing more. You could imagine them as a mouth, not one that calls or speaks, but one that accepts whatever is placed before it. Workers flow through the opening, the same way water finds its path along a channel. No one pauses, no one hesitates. You move with them, surrounded by the rustle of fabric, the shuffle of boots, the quiet exhale of people, preparing themselves for long hours ahead. Inside the courtyard, the ground shifts to packed stone. Uneven in the places, heavy machines have rolled across it. Your boots settle into the familiar grooves, worn into the surface over years of labour. The buildings rise on all sides, forming walls that funnel everyone toward the main workshop doors. Their windows reflect a dull glow, yellow and fogged, hinting at the machinery inside that has already begun its day. You hear faint clanks and whirs mixed with the hum of generators, sounds that create a mechanical lullaby with no intention of soothing. Groups of workers fan out ahead of you, moving toward their assigned entrances with an unspoken understanding of where they belong. Some carry rolled-up tool belts, others tuck gloves into their pockets. A few hold small lunch tins dented along the edges, stamped with names faded by years of handling. Everyone moves with that same steady pace, shoulders slightly hunched, as though bracing against a weight that has nothing to do with the cold. The walls along the courtyard are plastered with posters, each one shouting in large block letters about production goals, unity, dedication, and progress. The ink is bold and unwavering, but the paper curls at the corners, as if trying to detach itself from the stone. You glance at one without slowing your steps. The smiling faces of ideal workers stare back, their expressions so confident that they feel almost foreign. Their uniforms look freshly pressed, their posture impossibly straight. You know they have never seen the inside of this courtyard. They exist somewhere above it, in a version of reality where no one wakes before dawn with a dull ache behind their eyes. Near the main entrance, a supervisor stands with a clipboard, his breath forming short bursts in the cold. He wears a long coat that flaps slightly in the breeze, and his eyes flick between the crowd and the pages he holds. He doesn't speak, he simply observes, making occasional marks with a pencil that has been sharpened down to a stub. The workers passing him don't seek his attention. They lower their heads out of habit, moving into the workshop building with the efficiency of people who know that acknowledgement brings no reward. You step past him, the faint smell of oil growing stronger as you cross the threshold. The floor inside is coated with a thin film of dust that catches the light in muted glints. It softens the sound of your footsteps as you walk deeper into the corridor. The hallway walls are painted in a shade of beige that was once brighter but has faded into a colour that could be described generously as quiet. Pipes run along the ceiling, their surfaces warm enough to radiate a subtle heat, though it's uneven and unpredictable. Ahead, the corridor splits into multiple paths, each leading to a different part of the factory. Machining rooms, assembly lines, foundry sections, storage bays. You follow the same route you take every day, the path that requires no thought. Your body knows the turns better than your mind does. A left past the supply closet. A right by the bulletin board, with notices that never change. Another left around a pillar with a dent where someone dropped a crate years ago. As you walk, the sound of machinery grows louder, layering into a dense hum that vibrates through the floor. It's not chaotic. It has structure, rhythm, predictability, the clang of metal striking metal, the hiss of steam escaping from pressurized valves, the thrum of conveyor belts rolling along their tracks. Each noise fits neatly into a larger mechanical chorus, a song without melody that seems to run on its own, whether or not you participate in it. Workers peel off into their assigned stations, their bodies moving with the economy of people who have repeated the same motion thousands of times. A man brushes past you, adjusting the strap of his overalls. A woman ahead ties her hair under a scarf with movements so quick they seem instinctive. They settle into place, waiting for the shift whistle, waiting for the small signal that transforms a crowd into a workforce. You walk toward your own station, passing rows of equipment lined with precision that feels ceremonial. The air grows warmer near the assembly line, heavy with the smell of heated metal and machine lubricant. You feel it cling to your skin, seeping into your clothes, the way it does every day. It's a scent that lingers long after you leave the building, the kind that follows you home and settles into your pillow at night. A faint vibration pulses through the floor as the overhead cranes begin to move. Their hooks swing gently. Above the line, carrying pieces of metal that glint under the harsh white lights, the workers around you settle deeper into their roles, adjusting their stances, flexing their fingers, preparing for the hours ahead in quiet resignation. The gates outside are already forgotten. They are behind you, performing their function without fanfare, opening and closing with the indifference of a system that needs no emotion. You think of them only as a passage, the point where the world outside gives way to the one inside. A transition that becomes softer each day, so soft you sometimes forget there was a difference at all. You step into your place, the machinery breathing around you in slow, heavy patterns. The day has begun, not with excitement or dread, but with the calm certainty of routine, steady, unchanging, and unavoidable. The moment you settle into your station, the air vibrates with a weight that is almost physical, as if the sound itself presses against your ribs. The machinery is already in motion, speaking in the only language it knows, a grind here, a metallic sigh there, the steady clank of parts falling into place. All of it overlaps into a dense tapestry of noise, so thick you feel it through your boots before you hear it in your ears. The machines do not wait for you. They continue their conversation without acknowledging your arrival. You stand there, letting the rhythm wash over you in uneven waves, each one carrying a slightly different tone, a sharp ring from a dropped bolt, a hollow thud from a press completing its cycle, a long exhale of steam that rolls across the hall like a tired breath. You try, as you sometimes do, to find a pattern that might settle your mind. A reliable beat, a predictable pulse, but the sounds refuse to cooperate. They drift into predictable shapes, only to collapse into discord, like a melody that keeps forgetting its own notes. You reach for your tools, the handles cool against your palm. Their weight is familiar, though never comforting. The work begins not with intention, but with movement. Your hands aligning pieces, adjusting angles, tightening screws. The tasks follow each other with steady precision, the kind that bypasses thought entirely. You feel your fingers moving because you see them moving, not because you consciously guide them. Their actions are learned, ingrained, absorbed into muscle memory through repetition so thorough it feels like someone else taught your body without asking your permission. The noise around you swells as more machines join the chorus. A conveyor belt rattles to life behind you, carrying components that clatter into bins. With muted thumps, an overhead crane groans as it lifts a heavy sheet of metal, its hook swaying slightly as it passes above your head. Nearby, a worker slams a lever into place, the force sending a ripple of vibration through the metal floor. The entire hall seems to breathe in these sounds, expanding and contracting with every mechanical cycle. The smell of oil thickens in the warm air, blending with the metallic tang that coats your tongue. It's a scent that clings to everything. Your clothes, your hair, the skin of your hands. Even when you scrub it off in the evening, a faint trace remains, like a reminder that the factory follows you home, whether you want it to or not. Your station's machine gives a low rumble, a kind of sluggish awakening. You pull a lever, and the blade inside descends with a grinding noise that vibrates up your arm. Sparks flash briefly before fading into the dust that hangs suspended in the light. You adjust the next piece, and the process repeats, each step sliding into the next, with a fluid inevitability. The noise becomes a landscape of its own, uneven terrain made of clangs and hums and stuttering beats. There is no silence anywhere, not even in the spaces between motions. The factory fills every gap with something. The crack of metal under pressure, the sharp hiss of air compressors, the low drone of engines that never fully rest. At times, the sounds blend into a flat wall of noise that feels almost gentle in its consistency. At other times, sharp clangs slice through it, sudden and jarring, like a reminder that the machinery is very much alive and not particularly considerate. You watch a bolt roll across the floor and disappear under a crate. No one bothers to pick it up. It will stay there until someone accidentally kicks it loose weeks from now, at which point it will simply roll into another corner and continue its quiet journey. The factory has countless objects like that, lost pieces, forgotten scraps, tools that have slipped from tired hands. They all remain where they fall, absorbed into the building like sediment settling at the bottom of a river. A whistle sounds somewhere in the distance, not the shift whistle, but a smaller one from a supervisor's station. Workers adjust their pace slightly, though no instruction is given out loud. The shift has entered its middle rhythm, that long stretch where time stops, presenting itself in meaningful increments. Minutes melt into tasks, tasks melt into motions, motions melt into nothing. The heat radiating from the machines grows stronger, though the windows high above let in only the faintest strip of daylight. Dust floats in the beams like pale threads, twisting gently before disappearing back into the warm haze. You wipe your forehead with the back of your sleeve, smearing a thin streak of oil across your skin without noticing. You continue listening for patterns, as if somewhere in the dissonance, a softer sound might reveal itself. Something human, perhaps, or something comforting. But every attempt unravels almost as soon as it begins. The machines shift their tones without warning, their cycles overlapping in unpredictable ways. A press that had been striking with a steady beat suddenly pauses for several seconds, only to start again with a faster rhythm. A grinding wheel sputters, stalls, then revives with a harsh scrape. A distant engine coughs like someone clearing their throat, then settles into a low drone. The floor trembles with each heavy impact. Steel beams hum with vibration. Chains rattle overhead. The building seems to vibrate with a pulse all its own, a mechanical heartbeat that doesn't depend on the people inside it. If every worker vanished this moment, the machines would still keep moving until their momentum ran out. They were built to endure, to outlast fatigue, to ignore the limitations of flesh. You look around, observing the way others work. A man at the far table moves with slow efficiency, his face blank, his shoulders relaxed, in a posture earned through long hours of repetition. A woman beside him adjusts gears with practiced ease, barely glancing at the components she handles. Everyone seems suspended in the same muted concentration, their expressions drained of strain or enthusiasm. Their bodies obey the rhythm because resisting it would require energy no one has to spare. The noise swells again, filling your head until it becomes almost comforting in its chaos. It crowds out stray thoughts. It covers the small discomforts, the ache in your wrist, the stiffness in your shoulders, the fatigue sitting quietly at the base of your spine. It creates an environment where thinking too much becomes impractical. You simply do what the work requires, the same way you breathe without noticing. Occasionally, a brief silence emerges. Not true silence, but something close to it. A moment where the machines seem to inhale together. Pausing before the next cycle begins, the air thickens in those seconds. The workers straighten their backs. You feel the faint expectation of peace, a small hope that the break might last longer this time. Then the machinery exhales again. A thunderous clatter erupts down the line. The presses resume their strikes. The conveyor belts rattle back into motion. The foundry hisses as molten metal shifts in its containers, and whatever peace you imagined evaporates as quickly as it arrived. Hours slide past with no sign of progression, measured only by the gradual cooling of your tea in the tin cup beside you, untouched since the start of your shift. The surface forms a thin skin, dull and unmoving. You glance at it now and then, not because you intend to drink it, but because it gives you a small measure of time, a reminder that the day is moving, whether or not you feel it. You return to your motions, surrounded by the factory's unending voice, a voice made of steel rather than breath, certainty rather than emotion. It speaks in repetitions that never resolve, a chorus that never ends, a soundscape built not to inspire, but to endure. And you move within it, part of the rhythm whether you want to be or not, enveloped in a noise that claims every hour you offer and asks for the next without hesitation. The rhythm eventually settles around you, not because it becomes softer, but because your body stops asking it to. The sounds fold into a steady pressure that sits behind your ears, humming like an electrical current you've learned to tolerate. Your station narrows your world to a small rectangle of space. Steel table, oil-stained floor. The machine that demands your wrist and shoulder move in careful lines. Nothing outside that space matters, not because it shouldn't, but because it simply fades. Standing becomes its own discipline. Your feet find their places almost automatically, planted in a way that distributes your weight so evenly you forget what comfort once felt like. You shift occasionally, a small adjustment in angle or balance, but even those motions lose intention. They happen the way leaves move when wind brushes past, quietly, passively, without effort. Hours stretch out not as a long rope, but as a thick fog, measured not by clocks but by the slow ache that grows behind your knees. Your tool waits in your hand, cool at first, and then warm from your grip. You bring it forward, make a small adjustment to the part in front of you, and return it to the table. Then again, then again. The repetition becomes so fluid that you stop noticing the movements. They pass through you like an echo. Tasks arrive one after another, and you move through them as if stepping through shallow water, slow, steady, unresisting. Around you, the workers have settled into the same kind of stillness. Their shapes blend into the landscape of machinery, each one anchored in place by routine. Their limbs move because they have to, not because they intend to. Their expressions soften into a blankness that is almost peaceful. It's a stillness that could be mistaken for calm, but it has no softness in it. It is simply what the day has assigned. You focus on the part in front of you, tightening a bolt with practiced precision. The metal squeaks slightly, the sound swallowed immediately by the mechanical chorus surrounding you. You move to the next bolt, then the next, your fingers brushing over cold surfaces that feel the same no matter how many times you touch them. You count them without meaning to, not because anyone told you to count, but because counting gives your mind a direction to follow. One bolt, another. You count them the way someone might count breaths. Each number quietly marks your presence in a space that doesn't notice you. It is a small act of self-preservation, the simplest way to remember you are here. The minutes follow the same path. You notice them in passing, glancing at the wall clock, not for information, but for something to anchor your thoughts. The hands move slowly, as though struggling through the weight of the day. Time doesn't flow here, it drifts. You watch it with dull curiosity, the way someone might watch snow collecting on a windowsill. It happens whether you pay attention or not. Your legs tingle, then numb, then ache. But the transition is so gradual, you barely acknowledge it. Standing still becomes an occupation of the body, separate from the work of the hands. The factory shapes your posture into something resilient but drained, like a statue that has been placed here for functional reasons rather than aesthetic ones. Somewhere to your left, a worker clears his throat. The sound is swallowed almost instantly by the machines, but you feel it ripple through the stillness anyway. A woman across the aisle wipes her palms on her apron, leaving streaks of oil across the fabric. She returns to her task without looking up. Another worker shifts his weight from one foot to the other, a small adjustment that echoes through the floor like a tiny reminder that bodies weren't built for this kind of stasis. Standing still becomes an art, not because you seek mastery, but because the alternative is exhaustion. You learn how to let your muscles settle, how to avoid clenching your shoulders, how to keep your spine straight even as fatigue pulls at it. You learn which parts of the floor have slight dips that affect your balance. You learn how to pace your breaths so the rhythm matches your movements. These are skills no one teaches. They come from repetition, the same way grooves form in stone from years of touch. The factory air thickens as the heat rises. The smell of oil deepens, settling into the fabric of your clothes and the lines of your skin. You inhale slowly, not because it's pleasant, it isn't, but because breathing too quickly feels like another task to manage. The air tastes faintly metallic, like the residue from a spoon pressed too long against your tongue. You swallow it without thinking, letting it settle in your chest like a weight added to the others. You adjust another piece on the table, your fingers gliding over the same surface they've touched thousands of times. The metal is smooth in some places, rough in others, worn down by years of contact. From hands just like yours, it carries a faint warmth from the nearby machine, a reminder that even inanimate objects absorb the life around them. You tighten a screw, the subtle resistance of the thread giving you a momentary sense of completion. Though completion is a meaningless concept here, replaced by the understanding that another screw waits, then another, and another after that. The hours continue to drift. Lunch feels far away, but you don't let yourself imagine it. Imagining breaks makes the present heavier. Instead, you let your mind sink into the repetition. You trace invisible lines across the table. You notice tiny scratches that weren't there before. You follow the faint vibration of the machine as it travels through your fingertips. You count breaths between cycles. Sometimes you count heartbeats, though the noise makes them hard to detect. Standing like this, you begin to lose the distinction between holding still and being held still. The work does not require speed, only presence. Your body becomes something the factory expects, a fixed point around which parts move and processes unfold. You learn how to minimize strain, how to conserve energy, how to keep yourself anchored without resisting. The method is simple. You stop imagining movement. Stillness becomes your default state, a way of existing that demands less than motion. Your hands continue their tasks with obedient rhythm. The machine hums, the bolts line up, the cycles repeat. The floor holds your weight without shifting. The air thickens, then thins, then thickens again. Time turns into a long thread that coils around you, not constricting, just ever present. You stand in your rectangle of space, surrounded by steel and oil, counting small things, not because they matter, but because they tether you. Without the counting, the hours might drift too far, and you might drift with them. The numbers keep you anchored just enough to remain yourself, even if only a small piece of yourself. And you remain there, standing in the heat and noise, moving just enough to keep the machine satisfied, learning the quiet, draining discipline of holding still in a world built to keep you exactly where you are. The heat slowly collects around you, settling in thick layers on your skin as the shift stretches onward. The air inside the hall grows dense enough to feel, as though each inhalation requires a small negotiation with the room. You move through your tasks with the same steady precision, the metal warm beneath your fingertips, the faint vibration of the machine running up your arms like an unnoticed hum. As the hours drift forward, your eyes begin to wander upward, drawn not by curiosity, but by a kind of fatigued instinct. High above the machinery, almost hidden in the shadows near the rafters, the portraits wait. They line the upper walls in neat, evenly spaced rows, rigid faces staring outward with unwavering focus, their expressions carved into a permanent confidence that feels almost absurd against the noise and exhaustion below. The bright colours used to paint them stand in sharp contrast to the faded greys and browns of the factory floor. Reds that never dull, whites that never smudge, eyes that never look away. You catch one of those gazes between motions, your wrench pausing half a second longer than intended. The face stares down from its heavy frame with the reassurance of someone who has never had to inhale air thick with dust and oil. The expression holds a strange calm, as though the figure knows exactly how the day is supposed to unfold and expects you to follow it. A blank, unwavering stare that supervises without witnessing. You pull the next part into place, the metal whining softly as it meets the clamp. The sound blends instantly into the surrounding noise, swallowed like every thought that doesn't fit the rhythm of the work. Still, you feel the weight of those painted eyes lingering just above your head, observing you with a kind of ceremonial detachment. The portraits don't blink, they don't shift, they don't appear to notice the heat or the oil or the monotony. They simply oversee. A quiet exhale escapes your chest, unintentional but slow. You imagine, not seriously, but with the dull creativity that comes from fatigue, that the portraits exhale with you. A soft, bureaucratic sigh, the kind a person might make after reviewing paperwork for hours. Though their lips are sealed in carefully rehearsed expressions, you can almost feel the air of collective disappointment they radiate, as if each breath they supervise fails to meet a quota. The faces loom above every station, framed in wood that once shone, but has long since dulled. The paint is thick, layered to give each leader a sense of permanence, rarely afforded to the people beneath them. Every portrait faces forward, aligned with a mathematical precision that suggests someone meticulously ensured no pair of eyes ever looked away from the floor. You can't escape them, not by turning your head, not by lowering your gaze. If you look up at all, they are waiting. Your machine clicks back into place, the sound resonating through your palms. You continue working, moving from part to part, with quiet obedience. The portraits continue watching, silent but present, like reminders of an authority too large to name and too distant to imagine as human. Their eyes follow no individual, yet it feels as though they follow everyone. In the corner of the hall, a draft sneaks through the join in a window frame, fluttering the edge of a safety notice pinned to the wall. The paper trembles lightly in the air, but the portraits remain utterly still. Their hair never shifts, their clothing never creases. Even the shadows on their faces seem fixed, painted with such firm intention that light itself appears to bend around them rather than disturb them. Someone at the next station coughs, a dry sound that breaks through the mechanical roar for an instant. The worker wipes sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve, leaving a streak of grease behind. He glances upward, a reflexive motion, then returns to his task almost immediately, as if the portraits demanded that brief acknowledgement before allowing him to continue. You recognize that look. Everyone here shares it. It's the look of someone remembering the rules without having to read them. Another bolt slips from your fingers. It lands with a tiny metallic tap, disappearing beneath the edge of your station. You don't retrieve it. No one ever retrieves them. The factory floor swallows small pieces the way soil swallows raindrops. You reach for another bolt from the box, its edges sharp but familiar, and continue tightening. Above you, the painted faces remain fixed in their eternal patience. A faint layer of dust clings to the frames, interrupted only by the occasional streak where a supervisor's hand might have wiped away grime before an inspection. The smudges are uneven, as though cleaned by someone who didn't particularly want to be thorough. Some portraits are cleaner than others, a subtle hierarchy that raises questions you have no interest in answering. Perhaps some faces require more attention. Perhaps some are simply closer to the reaching height of a weary worker. Perhaps nothing means anything, and the dust settles where it wishes. You shift your weight slightly, easing pressure on your heel, and feel the floor's familiar texture beneath your boot. The vibration of the machines travels up through your legs and settles into your hips, a quiet reminder of how long you've been standing. Your spine adapts to the position, stiff but resigned. The portraits remain unchanged. They do not grow tired. They do not shift their stance. They do not feel the heat, the noise, the ache. Their eyes hold the kind of assurance that only exists in images, not in people. You lower your head to focus on aligning another piece. The light above flickers faintly, not enough to disrupt your work, but enough to cast a brief shadow across the portraits. For a second, the faces look different, softer, almost contemplative. Then the light steadies and the expressions return to their usual, unwavering certainty. You breathe out again, slower this time, and feel the air inside your lungs grow warm. The sound of the factory pulses around you, steady and alive. Every clank and grind seems to echo upward, bouncing against the high ceiling before falling back into the hall. The portraits receive the noise without flinching, their painted gazes turned eternally toward the source. You wonder how many shifts they've watched, how many workers have stood beneath them, shifting their weight in the same tired patterns. How many breaths the portraits have silently accompanied. Your neck grows stiff. You roll your shoulders, an almost imperceptible movement, and continue tightening brackets along the assembly line. The scent of oil deepens as the machine beside you releases another puff of vapour. A worker across the aisle adjusts her grip on a wrench, her hands blackened with grease. Above her, the portraits watch. Above everyone, the portraits watch. A faint hum from the overhead lights creates a second layer of sound, blending into the mechanical chorus. You try to separate the noises, the hum, the grind, the hiss, the clank, but they merge together too seamlessly. Your ears accept the mixture as a single, continuous voice. Against that voice, the portraits serve as punctuation marks, silent reminders of an order that never wavers. Your breaths come slow and even, each one threaded into the rhythm of the shift. You feel the air entering your lungs, warm with the dust of metal and sweat. For a brief moment, you imagine those painted figures breathing with you. Not deeply, not loudly, but with the muted resignation of bureaucrats reviewing endless paperwork. An imagined sigh, quiet and administrative. Then your tool clicks into place, the metal settling with a dull tone that dissolves into the noise. You look ahead, you tighten another bolt, you exhale. The portraits supervise, patient and immovable, as if they've been assigned to watch over every breath you take. Not with concern, but with the calm certainty of authority that never has to inhale the same air you do. The shift whistle cuts through the hall with a flat, uninspired tone, neither sharp nor urgent, just a signal, nothing more. The machines don't stop immediately. They wind down slowly, reluctant to loosen their grip on the rhythm. Their humming lingers in the air even after the workers step back. The vibration in your bones eases little by little, fading like a sound remembered rather than heard. Your fingers uncurl from your tool, stiff and faintly trembling, as though they've forgotten how to rest. You fall into the flow of bodies moving toward the exit of the hall. No one speaks at first. The noise of the machines still echoes quietly in everyone's heads. The corridor outside carries a mixture of cool drafts and the faint smell of metal residue drifting from other workshops. The sound of boots against the concrete creates its own kind of chorus, soft, uneven, occasionally scraping. The kind of sound that belongs to tired feet. The path to the canteen winds through a long hallway with narrow windows. Light presses through in thin stripes, pale and filtered. Dust floats in the beams like tired snowflakes that gave up halfway. You move through the corridor with slow steps, your pace shaped as much by habit as by hunger. Your stomach tightens in small pulses, not an urgent hunger, but the quiet strain of a body that expects sustenance purely because it has been working. Ahead, the scent of broth begins to gather, drifting lazily from the canteen doors. It's not particularly appealing, but it's familiar, and familiarity is often enough. You enter the wide room, its walls lined with wooden panels, worn smooth by years of contact. Large windows let in a soft, dull light that gives everything a faint yellow tint. The tables, the trays, even the faces of the workers who arrived before you. You join the line, moving forward inch by inch. Trays slide across the metal counter with small scraping sounds, each one stopping abruptly as a hand reaches for it. The woman ladling soup seems to have perfected the art of expressionless repetition. Her wrist moves with mechanical consistency, pouring portions that differ only by a few droplets. A second woman places a slice of bread onto each tray, her motions slow but steady, pressing the loaf down slightly to ensure it stays put. When your tray reaches you, the soup wobbles in its bowl, a thin liquid that smells faintly of boiled vegetables. It's warm enough to steam, but only just. The bread beside it looks like it was cut with more hope than precision. Uneven edges, a crust that seems to have grown tougher overnight. You take the tray and step aside, weaving through the room until you settle at an empty patch of table. The bench beneath you sighs under your weight, a soft groan from wood that has held too many lunch hours. You rest your elbows lightly on the table, letting your shoulders drop a little. The warmth from the soup drifts upward in weak waves, brushing your face in a way that feels more symbolic than nourishing. You lift the spoon, stir the liquid once, and take a small sip. It tastes like something that exists because it has to. There's no distinct flavour, just warmth, a hint of vegetables boiled until they surrendered, and the faintest echo of salt. It's neutral in the purest sense, a taste that avoids making any impression at all. The kind of soup that fills space rather than appetite. You swallow slowly, the warmth settling into your stomach like a placeholder. You tear a piece of bread from the slice. The crust crumbles slightly between your fingers, dry in some parts, soft in others, as though it hasn't fully decided what texture it wants to have. When you bite into it, it holds the unmistakable taste of something that was fresher yesterday. Not stale, just reserved. Bread that has quietly accepted its role and doesn't aspire to anything beyond it. Around you, conversations begin to rise in cautious murmurs. Nothing loud, nothing animated, just the safe topics drifting through the air like smoke. Someone comments on the weather, describing the morning chill with a shrug. Another wonders aloud how many weeks remain until the next ration delivery. A pair of workers discuss the reliability of a machine in the machining hall. Nothing critical, nothing that could be mistaken for dissatisfaction. Voices remain gentle, weighed down by the awareness that walls sometimes have ears. Cutlery clinks softly against bowls and plates, creating a fragile rhythm that fills the silence between conversations. The sound isn't lively, it's simply part of the room's background, like the hum of fluorescent lights or the faint rumble of distant machinery seeping through the walls. Chairs scrape occasionally as workers shift or stand, but even those movements carry a polite restraint. You take another spoonful, the liquid moving smoothly but without urgency. Your tongue recognizes each element: warmth, mildness, the faint echo of vegetables long surrendered, but none linger long enough to make an impression. The meal is fuel, not flavour, obligation, not indulgence. As you chew, your attention drifts across the room. Faces blur in the haze of steam and tired light. Everyone here shares the same quiet posture, hunched shoulders, slightly lowered heads, the soft inward gaze of people temporarily freed from noise, but not from expectation. Even rest feels structured, even silence feels supervised. You finish half the bowl before setting the spoon down for a moment. Your fingers curl loosely around the edges of the tray, absorbing the small warmth radiating from the bowl. The bread lies on the side, torn unevenly from the piece you bit. You consider eating more, then decide it doesn't matter. Hunger here isn't measured by desire, only by routine. At the next table, a man folds his hands and leans forward slightly, speaking in a tone barely above a whisper. His companion nods in small, careful motions, the kind of nods that confirm listening without revealing agreement or opinion. Their conversation drifts through the air, mentions of ration lines, a passing comment about boots wearing thin, a quiet acknowledgement of fatigue shared by everyone in the room. Farther across the canteen, a worker laughs once, a short muted exhale. More than a laugh, it rises just enough to be noticed, then dissolves into the background as quickly as it appeared. Someone must have said something mildly funny, not enough to draw attention, just enough to keep a moment from sinking too deeply into monotony. You raise the spoon again, finishing the last few mouthfuls of soup. The bowl empties easily, not because the portion was small, but because the taste offered no resistance. Eating feels like a task you've completed rather than an experience you've had. The bread follows in small bites, each one accompanied by a faint dryness that lingers on the roof of your mouth. When the bowl is empty and the bread reduced to crumbs, you rest your hands on the table for a moment. The warmth has faded, replaced by the steady coolness of the wood beneath your fingertips. The room hums softly around you, filled with the quiet rituals of midday, scraping spoons, muted voices, the occasional cough muffled into a sleeve. You stand slowly, lifting the tray with both hands. The bench creaks again, releasing you with the same tired tone it gave when you sat down. You carry the tray to the return station, placing it on the stack where dozens of others already rest, identical in their dull metal and faint heat. The canteen air follows you as you step toward the corridor, warm but thin, flavoured with the residue of soup and obligation. Behind you, conversations continue in safe, gentle tones. Ahead, the hallway waits with its muted light and lingering drafts. You walk toward it, your body preparing itself to return to the noise, the heat, and the tasks that don't end. Lunch fades behind you like a brief pause in a long sentence, something necessary, something expected, something that never dares to be more than it is. You carry the hollow weight of the tray back into the corridor, and the factory reclaims you without fuss. The heat washes over your shoulders as soon as you step through the doorway, a warm, oily blanket that seems to settle into the joints. The afternoon has its own density, heavier than the morning and less forgiving. It presses down, not with malice, but with an indifferent patience, like someone who has waited long enough for you to finish your lunch and now expects you to resume. You find your station with a quiet, practiced motion. Tools fit into your hands as if they remember you. The worn grips conform to your palms in a way that feels almost tender in its familiarity. There is no fanfare, no sudden jolt of energy. The line of work resumes as if it never paused. The conveyor starts again with a soft stuttering. The presses pick up their old cadence, and the whole hall breathes the same mechanical inhalation it has always breathed. Time does not leap forward here. It accumulates, it thickens. You feel minutes as if they were droplets that collect on your skin, each one heavier than the last. You move through your motions with the economy of someone saving energy for unknown distances. Your hands perform the tasks with steady competence, but your body lags slightly behind, a fraction out of phase with the machine's precise timing. Where once a movement was crisp, it is now rounded by fatigue. Where once your back held a straight line, it begins to curve imperceptibly towards slouch. Around you, the machinery seems to acknowledge the afternoon in its own way. Motors that hummed with sharp intensity now vibrate in a lower key, belts sag minutely on their rollers. The presses pause for half a second longer between cycles, not because they intend to be gentle, but because metal and oil respond to heat and wear just as flesh does. The factory's voice deepens, the chorus grows slower. There is a small, almost grudging sympathy in that change, a shared deterioration that binds human and machine alike. You notice the difference, most in your limbs. Your shoulders carry a slow crescendo of ache. Your knees throb faintly with each shift of weight. The ache is not sharp, it is the kind that layers itself like sediment, building quietly until you recognize it as part of your profile. When you reach for a bolt now, your thumb hesitates for half a beat before it wraps around the metal. The hesitation feels like a small theft, a private rebellion against the relentless schedule. Counting helps. You count bolts not because it speeds the task, but because it organizes the blur into manageable pieces. 1, 2, 3. The numbers sit in your head like small stones you toss into a slow river, each making a dull, certain sound upon impact. Your mind drifts around them, not straying far. Drifting less feels safer. Occasionally, you shift your counting to other things. The number of inches on the conveyor belt passed since you last paused. The number of workers you can see in a single glance. The number of times the overhead light flickers before steadying. Counting is a private scaffolding that keeps you from dissolving into the hum. The canteen warmth has left a faint residue on your face, a memory of heat that mingles with the oil now. You wipe your brow with the inside of your wrist, smearing a thin streak of grease into your skin. It's an old habit, the sort that carries a small resigned humour. You mark yourself with the work as a craftsperson might, but there is no pride in it, only recognition. The small joke is that the grease will be cleaned off at home, only to be replaced the next morning. The factory marks are cyclical, like everything else here. At the far end of your line, a supervisor walks, slowly, clipboard held in a loose grip. He moves among the stations, like someone checking a ledger rather than watching people. His presence is not menacing, it is administrative, a reminder that each motion you make is recorded in some manner, measured, compared. You do not mind the inspection. You have learned to be invisible in efficiency. The supervisor's eyes register numbers, not the small vanishing fatigue in your face. If there is judgment, it passes along as data rather than emotion. Between cycles, the air feels thinner, though it is only your perception bending with the day. You become acutely aware of small things. The scratch on your station's metal edge that cuts the pad of your thumb if you aren't careful. The way the light from the skylights creates a fine strip of glare on certain parts, making them harder to see. The soft stuttering cough from an engine across the hall that sounds suspicious and human. At once details crowd your attention because large scales have become unbearable to hold. A woman nearby loosens her scarf and ties her hair more tightly, a motion that speaks of adaptation rather than comfort. She moves with narrowed concentration, eyes soft but steady. A man beside her rubs the back of his neck, the skin there reddening slightly from effort. Their motions are quiet acts of maintenance, gestures meant to keep a worn body serviceable for another hour, another shift. There is an economy to their movements that feels almost respectful. Nothing wasted, nothing dramatic. The factory's heat swells as the day presses on. Air that was only warm in the morning becomes thick and stale now, filled with particles that float like dust motes in the sputtering light. You cough once, small and involuntary, and a dozen heads turn briefly, then return to their work. Coughing here is an ordinary punctuation. It creates no alarm. The cough is part of the grammar of long shifts, like a comma that appears without changing the sentence's meaning. Sometimes beneath the hum and clang, you can catch a snippet of conversation, a fragment about a spare part arriving late, a remark about the reliability of a certain foundry process, a joke so dry it doesn't sound like humour until you reframe it that way. In your head, dry humour survives here, in small breathless pockets. A line muttered about the boss's promised bonus, an observation about how the promised improvements always seem to mean more work. These comments are small, deflected, safe. They are relief offered in minuscule portions that the machinery does not notice. Your movements slow further as a long cycle drags on. The presses take longer to return to their starting position, and the conveyor hesitates for the barest of seconds before resuming its steady march. Those slight delays amplify the sense of tiredness, a gentle punishment that makes every next motion more deliberate. You feel, with an odd clarity, how close you are to the limit of simply repeating motions. The factory provides no crescendo of purpose. Its progression is horizontal, a long, even plateau that goes on until you are relieved or until you give up and the shift ends. A bell signals a short break, not a full rest, only enough minutes to sit, breathe, and maybe stretch the spine. The pause is a relief, but it is thin. You join the others in a small cluster near the wall, leaning against the cool metal, as if supported by it. Conversations dilate and contract in those pockets. Someone mentions a relative's illness, another compares the new schedule with the old. Someone else remarks on the rumour of increased quotas next month. Words move like cautious animals here, never venturing far from the safety of shared understanding. You take a breath and notice how your chest feels heavier than it did this morning. Not necessarily due to exertion, but as if the day itself has accumulated inside you. The idea of repeating these motions tomorrow feels like a landscape you can already see, long, flat, and unchanging. The thought settles with a subjective weight, near but not crushing. It causes a small dry laugh to surface in your throat, a private, almost embarrassed sound, because laughter here is always shy, tucked away to avoid being mistaken for something else. The afternoon continues and the slow work resumes. The light from the high windows shifts to slant across the floor, carving lines that march toward the exit. You notice the way the shadows get longer, how they seem to pull near the base of machines and in the corners where scrap collects. The factory takes on deeper tones as day moves forward, colours flattening into more uniform greys. It is almost as if the building itself is drawing inward, conserving shape and heat for the work that must continue. You find yourself calculating time in small units again. The number of cycles until the whistle for the end of the shift, the number of parts left in the current crate, the number of steps to the wash basins. These tiny mental measures act like breathers, an orderly way to keep from unravelling. You tell yourself the hours will pass, indifferent to whether you watch them or not. This belief has a strange, blunt honesty that eases you slightly. When the whistle finally blows, there is no release like a curtain dropping. The machines slow and die back into silence with the same patient efficiency that began them. Workers file out in the same steady, disciplined way they entered, shoulders relaxed but not free. Your limbs feel leaden as you move, the repetitive motions of the day leaving their signature in a slow, patient ache. You step toward the exit, the air outside seeming a fraction cooler and somehow unreachable until you cross the threshold. The day has worn you down, not with drama, but with steady attrition. It's the kind of exhaustion that is quiet, administrative, and inevitable. An erosion marked by small registers rather than grand gestures. You walk home carrying that weight, aware of how the city will greet you with its muted light and the chimneys already preparing for another tomorrow. The walk away from the machines softens the noise, but not the feeling they leave behind. The afternoon light has slipped into a flattened hue, dulled by the industrial haze that hangs above the streets. Your steps fall into the rhythm of those around you, steady, inward, almost synchronized without effort. Shoulders droop at nearly identical angles. Faces hold the same muted expression that comes not from sorrow, but from the practical conservation of energy. You fall in beside a small cluster of co-workers, not out of intention, but because the flow of bodies pulls everyone together. The air between all of you carries a kind of shared fatigue, though the atmosphere remains oddly gentle. No one rushes, no one seems restless. The group moves with the quiet understanding of people who have spent countless hours in the same spaces, breathing the same air, practicing the same restrained habits. A man to your left comments on the weather. Not today's weather, but weather in the abstract, the kind no one can disagree with. Cold for this time of year, he says, though the temperature is exactly what everyone expected. His tone suggests the statement is not meant to carry information. It is a kind of verbal placeholder, filling space in the way steam fills a kettle. You respond with a soft hum, neither agreement nor contradiction. Words feel heavy when they carry meaning, so you choose a sound instead. He nods, satisfied, as though something has been accomplished. The conversation ends there without truly beginning. Another worker mentions a rumour, something about production targets shifting next quarter, but offers no details. It is safer that way. You acknowledge him with a small tilt of your head, an expression so slight it could be mistaken for adjusting your collar. He seems content with your non-answer. People here have learned to speak in shapes rather than content, letting tone do the work that words used to do. As you walk, the group folds around corners and down narrow streets, lined with the same concrete buildings that framed your morning. Their windows reflect the dimming light in long pale streaks. Your boots scuff quietly against the pavement, and the sound blends with the shuffle of others, creating a kind of communal murmur that replaces conversation. Someone behind you chuckles softly, not at a joke, but at something said that was too vague to be offensive and too bland to be memorable. The laughter is short-lived, the kind of sound that evaporates before it can be interpreted. It leaves behind a momentary warmth, a small acknowledgement that humour can survive even in environments where it has no real purpose. At a street corner, the group slows slightly as a pair of uniformed men walk past. Their strides are sharp, their expressions carved into stone. Everyone instinctively lowers their voices, not out of fear, but out of a reflex more ingrained than posture. Even those who weren't speaking grow quieter, as though silence itself were the appropriate greeting. The men pass without glancing at anyone, and the group resumes its pace with the same soft cadence. You listen to the fragments of speech drifting around you. None of them hold substance. They are threads of conversation, designed to soothe the space between footsteps. A woman mentions the line outside the bakery earlier that morning, describing its length without offering any personal opinion. Another man mutters something about a neighbour's new coat, pointing out the colour and nothing else. Small remarks float like dust motes, lighter than real thoughts, careful not to imply anything more than observation. This is not dishonesty, it is adaptation. You've learned it in the same way you've learned how to stand for hours, how to lift without strain, how to breathe factory air without noticing the taste. Speech here is a tool that protects more than it expresses. It shields intention, it disguises fatigue, it keeps the peace without drawing attention. You speak in circles not to hide anything dangerous, but because you have nothing extra to give. The path narrows as you approach the tram stop. The line of people ahead forms a patient serpent, bending around the rusted railing in a slow coil. No one complains. Complaints require investment, An investment is a currency no one spends casually. You step into the line, your hands resting lightly at your sides, your breath forming a faint cloud in the cooling air. Two workers in front of you exchange a brief conversation about someone's cousin getting a new job. The details are missing, where, how, why, but the tone suggests the story is positive. You nod when one of them glances back at you, not because you know the cousin, but because positive tones deserve reinforcement in spaces where they are rare. The tram arrives with a groan, the metal brakes scraping against the wheels in a sound that feels older than the city itself. You climb aboard with the others, standing shoulder to shoulder in the crowded carriage. The interior smells faintly of wool and old varnish. A faint vibration runs through the floor as the tram starts moving again, rattling along the tracks with a resigned determination. Inside the carriage, the same quiet rules apply. You hold onto the handrail, fingers wrapped loosely around the cold metal. A woman beside you whispers to her companion about the price of potatoes, her voice so soft it barely rises above the hum of the tram. A man near the door sighs once, then catches himself, converting the sigh into a small cough, a socially acceptable sound. A teenager stares out the window with an expression that suggests neither daydreaming nor frustration, just the suspended stillness of someone saving their thoughts for later. You shift your weight as the tram turns. The movement brings you closer to a group of older men discussing something in a tone so roundabout it takes several sentences to realize they are talking about a recent film. Their opinions are soft-edged, deliberately incomplete. Words like interesting and unexpected hold no meaning here. They simply float above the real idea, keeping everything suspended. You contribute nothing. Silence is not an absence in this environment. It is a strategy, a communal language, a way to participate without exposing anything personal. You rest in that silence the way someone might rest in shade on a hot day, not because the sun is unbearable, but because shade demands nothing. The tram jostles gently as it enters a turn, and someone lightly bumps your shoulder. They murmur a quiet apology that sounds more ceremonial than sincere. You respond with a soft, "It's fine," though the words slip out so evenly they could almost be mistaken for breath. As the tram approaches your stop, the group thins slightly. You step down onto the pavement with the same deliberate care shared by everyone around you. The evening light casts long shadows across the street, stretching the figures of walking people into thin, wavering silhouettes. Footsteps scatter softly on the cold ground, each person peeling off onto their own path home, but leaving behind the faint echo of shared restraint. The air cools further, brushing against your cheeks with a thin draft. You walk the last few blocks in relative quiet. A pair of neighbours exchange greetings on a doorstep, the kind of greetings that involve no follow-up questions. A man sweeping the front of his building nods once, a gesture that asks nothing and reveals nothing. Everything feels balanced on a calm surface, carefully maintained through small controlled exchanges. When you reach the entrance of your building, the stairwell greets you with its hollow acoustics and familiar scent of dust. You hear your own footsteps, as if they belong to someone walking just ahead of you. The walls seem to absorb the day's earlier noise, softening it into the faint rustle of coats and the gentle close of distant doors. You climb slowly, the railing cool beneath your palm. As you reach your floor, a neighbour appears at the end of the hall. He offers a polite, vague smile, not too warm, not too cold, exactly calibrated to the distance between you. You return it with equal precision. No words pass between you. They aren't needed. The greeting is complete. Behind your own door, the quiet deepens. Not a heavy or lonely quiet, just the kind that arrives after an entire day of measured tones and careful phrasing. You set your things aside and let the silence settle around you like a blanket, soft and familiar. Saying nothing important becomes its own kind of rest. The effort lies not in speaking, but in knowing which parts of yourself are better left unspoken. The hallway of your building greets you with a faint draft, a soft breath of old plaster and cooking smells that have seeped into the walls. Over years, the door closes behind you with a muted click, and the world outside falls away into a quiet stillness, broken only by distant footsteps. The stairwell spirals upward, each step echoing in a tired rhythm that seems to match the cadence of your own pulse. Your hand glides along the railing, its wooden surface worn smooth by countless palms, some from people you know only in passing, others long gone but still present in the sheen of the grain. The building hums with life in a subdued way. Behind doors you hear the muffled clang of a pot lid, the low murmur of a radio turned down to a cautious volume, a child's whimper quickly soothed by a gentle shush. Sounds overlap but never rise enough to disturb. Everyone here has learned how to live thinly, as if not to press too heavily on the walls. Your floor meets you with dim lighting and the familiar scent of soup, soap and something faintly burnt. The corridor stretches ahead with doors spaced unevenly, each one showing its age in peeling paint and shallow dents. You move past them quietly, steps soft, out of instinct rather than courtesy. The quiet here is not enforced. It is a natural byproduct of weariness. Everyone has used their voices sparingly throughout the day, and evenings offer no reason to spend what little remains. A door opens behind you, and a neighbour slips out with a bucket of coal, nodding in your direction. The nod contains the full exchange: greeting, acknowledgement, farewell, delivered with the efficiency of someone who has perfected small interactions. His boots thud softly against the floor as he heads toward the stove room, his steps swallowed by the narrow hallway before the door closes again. You enter the communal kitchen, its single overhead bulb casting a pale yellowish glow. The room is a collage of other people's routines: chipped enamel pots stacked on the counter, cutting boards leaning precariously against the wall, a sink filled with dishes that no one claims and yet everyone uses. The stove radiates a dull heat, its burners flickering gently under mismatched pans. A mixture of smells blends into a scent that has no beginning or end. Leftover cabbage, boiled potatoes, burnt flour, soap residue, and the unmistakable tang of fatigue. It is not unpleasant. It is simply dense, like a sentence spoken too many times. You breathe it in slowly, letting the air settle deep in your chest as you take your place near the counter. Someone has left breadcrumbs scattered across the table, and a faint trail of flour clings to the handle of a drawer. A kettle sits on the back burner, rattling gently as steam escapes through its spout. Its soft whistling pierces the room's stillness, sounding almost apologetic. You fill a cup with lukewarm tea, stirring the flakes of leaf at the bottom. The metal spoon taps gently against the enamel rim, a small hollow sound that feels almost cheerful in comparison to the day's other noises. You drink slowly, letting the heat graze your throat. It is not strong tea, more like tinted water, but it has enough warmth to settle into your stomach. Around the room, signs of life drift in and out. A woman scrapes the last bits of porridge from a pan, humming an aimless tune under her breath. Her child sits on a stool beside her, small feet dangling, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. A man near the sink wipes his dishes with deliberate care, his motions slow enough to suggest he's delaying returning to his room, for reasons even he might not articulate. Another person enters briefly to fetch a spoon, offers a soft greeting, and exits again. No one asks about anyone's day. There is nothing to be gained by describing what everyone already knows. You rinse your cup, the water from the tap running in thin, uneven spurts that splash more than they flow. The pipes groan faintly, tired from years of service. You wipe the cup dry with a cloth hanging nearby, unsure whether it belongs to anyone in particular, then place it back on the shelf. Leaving the kitchen, you feel the weight of the day shift slightly, settling into your shoulders in a more familiar way. The sounds of the room fade behind you, swallowed by the hallway's long, hollow quiet. Your door opens with its usual complaint, a creak that echoes down the corridor before slipping into silence. Inside, the small space greets you with its own brand of exhaustion. Your coat falls onto its hook with a heavy slump. The air carries the lingering scent of your own presence. Work, dust, a trace of oil that even washing cannot fully remove. You sit on the edge of your bed for a moment, letting your body register the change from motion to stillness. The thin mattress sags slightly under your weight, shifting the shape of the blanket. From the room next door comes the faint sound of a radio playing an evening program. The voice of the announcer carries through the wall in a monotone drone, not loud enough to hear the words, but enough to sense the certainty in the tone. The broadcast speaks with the confidence of someone who has never stood in a ration line or breathed the air inside a factory hall. You listen for a moment, not because you're interested, but because the sound acts like a distant lighthouse, something steady, predictable, far removed from your own life. You pull off your boots, one at a time. They release the shape of your feet reluctantly, creaking as though the leather itself has grown tired. Your socks cling to your skin with the warmth of long wear, and you peel them off slowly, noticing the faint marks the fabric has left behind. These indentations vanish after a few minutes, but for now, they are small records of the hours you have spent standing. The light in your room flickers once before settling into its usual dim glow. Shadows stretch across the walls, soft and uneven. The small table near the window holds a single book with its spine cracked from repeated readings. You touch the cover, but don't open it. Your eyes feel too heavy for letters to hold shape. You sit back, letting gravity ease your muscles. The faint murmur from the hallway continues. A door closing, the whisper of slippers on linoleum. The dull clink of a pot being set down somewhere far away. Life in the apartment unfolds in thin layers, each one careful not to disturb the others. Even arguments, when they happen, are hushed, compressed into short bursts that die out quickly. You hear the child from earlier being coaxed to sleep, the cadence of the mother's voice soothing in its low, steady rhythm. The sound floats through the corridor, soft and diluted, like a lullaby being carried by memory rather than intention. It drifts into your room and settles in the air, blending with the faint hum of the radiator. Outside your window, the courtyard is already cloaked in darkness. A single street lamp casts an amber ring of light that barely reaches the ground. You catch a glimpse of snowflakes drifting in slow, hesitant spirals, small patches of white that melt as soon as they touch the air, rising from the building. The world looks distant through the frost-lined glass, as if existing just beyond reach. You lie down, letting the day's weight seep into the mattress. The quiet around you isn't empty. It's layered with other people's lives, their routines folding into yours, like pages from the same worn book. The walls may be thin, but the space between everyone feels thick with mutual restraint, a silence built not on secrecy, but on courtesy shaped by exhaustion. You close your eyes, and the room holds you with patient stillness. Evening in the communal apartment becomes a soft exhale, shared across walls, doors, and weary bodies. A quiet world of small routines, lived carefully, lived together, lived without asking for more. The quiet inside your room settles only briefly before another obligation tugs at you. You pull on your coat again, feeling the fabric cling with a stiffness that comes from long wear and too many evenings like this one. The hallway is cooler now, as if the building itself exhales once the mealtime heat fades. You step softly so as not to draw attention, though no one is listening closely. The shared exhaustion here is its own form of privacy. Outside, the night air greets you with a sharper cold than before, the kind that tightens the skin around your cheeks and makes each breath visible. A thin frost coats the edges of the pavement, glinting under the pale light of street lamps. You follow a path you know well. The signs are faint but familiar. A patch of concrete with a crack, shaped like a crooked line. A dark smudge on the wall, where someone once leaned their bicycle. A peeling poster announcing last month's cultural event. These landmarks aren't remarkable, but they arrange themselves into a quiet chorus, guiding you toward the part of the city that rarely sleeps. Evenings are for queues. You see the first one at the corner, winding slowly along the wall of a store whose windows hold displays almost empty enough to look abandoned. Lines stretch outward like tired serpents, their bodies made of hunched shoulders and hands tucked deep into pockets. Everyone stands with a similar stillness, the kind that comes not from patience, but from surrender to routine. You move toward the nearest cluster, watching the way the people merge into place without questioning their position. No one asks who is last. The shape of the line answers the question on its own. You join with a small shift of weight, stepping into the rhythm without disturbing the flow. The man ahead of you gives a faint nod, recognition, not greeting, and then returns to gazing at the dimly lit storefront, as if the act of staring might summon more items inside. Behind you, a woman adjusts her scarf and folds her arms tightly, creating a small barrier against the cold. Her breath drifts upward in slow puffs, joining the soft clouds of the others in line. You wait without speaking. Words are unnecessary here. Everyone understands the choreography of these evenings. Stand, breathe, step forward when the line allows. Shift your weight when the cold pricks too sharply, and try not to think about how many times this same scene will play out again. The street is quiet, except for the faint hum of a street lamp and the distant rumble of a tram pulling into its final rounds. Footsteps echo occasionally as someone passes by, but no one rushes. Rushing implies urgency, and this kind of life has few occasions that demand speed. Even hunger waits politely in line. A child farther up the queue tugs at his mother's coat, asking something in a small, chilled whisper. She leans down and answers with the softness of someone too tired to infuse her words with tone. The child nods solemnly, adjusting his wool hat with clumsy hands. He takes his place again, eyes half-lidded with sleep. Children learn these patterns young, absorbing the rhythm of waiting long before they can understand the reasons for it. You shift slightly, easing pressure from one foot to the other. The ground beneath you is hard, the cold radiating upward through the soles of your boots. Your hands warm only slowly in your pockets, fingers stiff from the day's work. The scent of the air changes subtly as the wind moves. A faint hint of bread from somewhere farther down the street, a passing note of kerosene from a nearby building, even the mild sweetness of roasted beets from a vendor who is likely packing up for the night. These scents drift without urgency, mixing into a quiet collage that belongs to evenings like this one. Someone ahead clears his throat, another coughs softly. Someone farther back sighs, though the sound is nearly lost beneath the hum of the lamps. The line inches forward, not enough to matter, but enough to give you the sense of progress. It is a slow dance, one step at a time, measured by the slow movements of people who have performed this ritual too often for it to feel novel. You glance at the store window without expecting change. Shelves inside hold sparse arrangements of canned goods, jars and loaves that seem smaller each time you come. A clerk moves behind the counter with mechanical precision, handing items to the customers who have reached the front. No one complains aloud. Complaints in these spaces feel redundant, the kind of noise that falls flat before it even leaves the mouth. The man ahead of you turns his head slightly, offering an observation about how the store might close early tonight. His voice is low, gentle, as if afraid to disturb the thin veneer of calm stitched across the line. You respond with a small murmur of agreement. There is no need to add more. A full sentence might feel extravagant in a place where people can serve everything: food, energy, opinions. He nods once and faces forward again. Time moves strangely here. The minutes do not pass so much as accumulate around your ankles, settling like fine dust. You breathe slowly, letting the cold seep into your lungs. Your thoughts drift in small, manageable circles. How long until you reach the front? Whether the store still has what you came for? How soon you can return to your room and feel the faint warmth of the radiator? These thoughts float without urgency, as unobtrusive as the shuffling of the line. The wind picks up briefly, tugging at your coat and brushing your ear with a cold flick. You tuck your scarf closer to your neck. The fabric smells faintly of the kitchen from earlier. Boiled tea, lingering bread crust, and the quiet scent of shared living. Even out here, those smells cling to you, forming a small boundary of familiarity in the open night. A man behind you breaks the silence with a comment about how the ration lines last winter stretched so far they wrapped around the next street. His tone is flat, not reminiscing or complaining, simply stating. You nod again, the kind of nod that conveys understanding without necessarily inviting more conversation. He seems satisfied, shifting slightly to give his toes room to warm in his boots. As the line curates itself forward, you finally reach the door. A small bell above it jingles weakly as the next person enters. When your turn comes, the warmth inside brushes against your face like a brief memory of comfort. The air carries the mixed smell of flour dust, paper packaging, and fabric worn by too many hands. You step into the room with the quiet precision of someone entering a shared space where emotions are best kept small. The clerk meets your eyes with a tired neutrality, neither welcoming nor dismissing. You place your request in the simplest terms, your voice low. He nods once, retrieves what remains, and hands it to you with the efficiency of a routine he has repeated thousands of times. You accept the items and step aside so the next person can take your place. Back outside, the cold presses against your face again, but it feels different now, less intrusive, almost familiar. You tuck the small parcel under your arm and begin the walk home. The lights flicker along the street, casting long shadows that stretch like dark ribbons behind you. A few people pass at a quiet distance, each walking with the same measured gait that you've adopted without thinking. By the time you reach your building, the night has grown heavier. The corridors inside feel warmer in comparison, their narrow walls holding on to the heat left behind by the day's collective routines. You move through them carefully, holding the parcel with both hands, as though carrying something fragile, even if what you carry is small and plain and will vanish by morning. Your room greets you in the same dim stillness as before. You set your things down with gentle motions, feeling the day fold itself inward as you loosen your coat and let it fall across the chair. The radiator hums softly, its warmth limited but sincere in its effort. In this quiet, surrounded by thin walls and faint light, you feel the cue still lingering in your bones. A slow, extended pause, preserved in the muscles of your back and the soles of your feet. Another necessity acquired, another evening spent waiting, another small piece of life lived in the long, muted rhythm of survival. The small parcel rests on your table, its paper wrapper creased and soft at the corners. You loosen the twine with hands that move out of habit rather than curiosity. The contents are modest, enough to justify the trip, not enough to feel triumphant. You place each item carefully where it belongs, creating a semblance of order in a room too small for disorder to take hold. The radiator hums with uneven warmth, its metal casing ticking faintly as it expands. You shed your coat and drape it over the chair in a way that suggests care, but is really just exhaustion. The thin bulb overhead flickers once, then steadies into a dim glow that paints the room in muted shades of gold and shadow. Nothing here is bright, everything is softened by time and use. The radio on the shelf sits like a patient old companion, square, scratched, and humming quietly, as if listening before it speaks. You turn the dial with a gentle twist, and static rushes forward like a breath being drawn. It settles into a familiar, steady rhythm, and then the announcer's voice emerges, smooth and practiced. The tone is confident, polished, carrying the weight of certainty even through the frayed cloth of the speaker. His words glide with a kind of official warmth, the kind designed to reassure rather than inform. He speaks of progress, of successes achieved, of quotas surpassed, of industries thriving under the careful guidance of those whose portraits hang in every hall. You hear numbers delivered with unwavering pride, each one polished to perfection. There is no hesitation, no doubt, no weariness. It is a voice that has never stood in a line at night, never held a ration card, never dropped a bolt onto an oily floor. You sit on the edge of your bed, leaning back slightly, letting the sound fill the room in gentle waves. It washes over you the way rain might fall on concrete, steady, rhythmic, distant. The words land without sticking, sliding off your thoughts as naturally as water beads on wax. You listen because listening requires no effort. You absorb nothing because absorbing would mean engaging. And you learned years ago that disengagement is its own kind of rest. The announcer praises the latest accomplishments of the great industrial plan. His voice lifts on certain phrases, as if inviting you to picture factories glowing with vitality and workers smiling as they raise tools toward the future. You know the tone well. It is the sound of triumph delivered from far above, untouched by the grime that coats the floors you stand on each morning. He talks about rising output, expanding progress, abundant opportunities. His certainty leaves no room for fatigue, no space for doubt. According to the voice, the nation is flourishing. Every worker is a hero. Every task is a contribution to a grand design that shines just beyond the horizon. You shift slightly, rubbing the ache from your wrist where the day still lingers. The sound of the radio forms a layer between you and the room, softening the edges of reality. You watch the shadows tremble on the wall, cast by the small, flickering bulb. The announcer's certainty contrasts sharply with the tired hum of your body, but there is no conflict, only a gentle absurdity, too mild to resist. He moves on to a story about increased agricultural output in a region you've never visited. He describes fertile fields and tireless workers harvesting under the watchful eye of leadership. You imagine these fields for a moment, wide, distant, painted with the same confident brush used to illustrate the posters in the corridor. Then the image dissolves, unable to compete with the grainy hum of the radiator and the faint draft creeping in from the window. A soft knock echoes from somewhere down the hall, followed by muffled voices. Your neighbours speaking in low tones, perhaps discussing groceries, perhaps reminding a child to finish their chores. Life continues behind these thin walls in small, gentle shapes. The radio continues too, oblivious to the everyday choreography around it. You return your attention to the voice. Now it speaks about unity, about privilege, about how fortunate you are to be part of this noble effort. The announcer sounds almost tender at times, as if he genuinely believes you should feel honoured. You try to picture someone truly uplifted by this message. Someone who might sit straighter when the words bright future drift through the air. Perhaps such a person exists somewhere in a different apartment with a fuller pantry and an easier life. Or perhaps the announcer is speaking to himself, repeating the message often enough to believe it. Your tea has cooled, forgotten on the table. A thin skin of residue forms on its surface, trembling slightly each time the radiator pipes rattle. You pick up the cup and sip it despite the temperature. It tastes of metal and weak leaves, but the warmth is enough to coat your throat. The broadcast shifts again. Stories of workers receiving awards for exceptional performance, of factories surpassing quotas, of teenagers joining youth brigades with heroic enthusiasm. You imagine those teenagers, the idealized versions you have seen on posters, glowing eyes, sharp smiles, perfect uniforms. The real teenagers you know ride trams in worn coats and save their energy for laughter, whispered beneath blankets, but the voice does not speak of them. It speaks of a world where everything works. The room dimly mirrors that imagined world. The shadows sway gently as the light flickers again. The hiss of the radiator strengthens, filling the silence between words. The night outside presses softly against the window pane, blurring the boundary between cold air and warm breath. You lean your head back against the wall, closing your eyes for a moment. The announcer's voice becomes a low drone, not unpleasant, just steady. You listen, the way one listens to distant thunder, present but disconnected. The words blend into each other, losing their edges, becoming nothing more than sound. Propaganda, you realize, is most effective when it is soothing. The broadcast continues with its expected rhythm, achievements recited with ceremonial precision, praise delivered with gentle authority, promises offered with confidence so smooth it could be mistaken for truth if you were less tired. Your eyes open slowly, drawn to the frost forming along the window's edge. The pattern resembles delicate veins spreading across the glass. Intricate and quiet, you watch as your breath creates a small patch of fog that quickly dissolves. The radio begins playing patriotic music. Grand, orchestral, uplifting in theory. The melody sweeps across the room, the brass instruments sounding slightly distorted through the old speaker. You imagine a stage somewhere, musicians performing with earnest intensity, unaware of how their music transforms when filtered through thin wires and weary walls. You turn the dial down a little, allowing the volume to fall to a manageable level. Not silence, just softer. Enough to let you drift within your thoughts without drowning in them. Outside, footsteps echo down the corridor again. Someone coughs. A pot clatters faintly in the kitchen. Small reminders that the world you live in is not the world the announcer describes. And yet, you don't argue with the voice. You let it speak. You let it fill the room with its carefully chosen optimism. It costs nothing to listen. It costs too much to believe. The music fades and the announcer returns with closing remarks about unity, productivity, and the bright horizon awaiting all who work hard. His tone rises, then settles, then rises again, like someone practicing enthusiasm from a script. When he signs off, the radio hums softly, as if catching its breath. You switch it off. The silence that follows is gentle, familiar, unpretentious. A silence that doesn't require belief, only presence. You let it settle around you like a blanket, warm enough for this room, this night, this life lived quietly, in the space between promises and reality. The silence that settles after the radio clicks off lingers in the room like a thin veil. You sit for a moment, letting your eyes adjust to the dimness. The bulb hums faintly, but the light it gives off is tired, pooling only in the center of the room before surrendering to shadows. The air feels still, layered with the softness that comes at the end of long days. Days that seem to fold into each other until their edges blur. You move slowly, loosening the stiffness that has clung to your shoulders since morning. The floorboards cool your feet through your socks, the wood holding the chill of the season, even in a heated room. The small window lets in a sliver of moonlight, pale and thin, carving a line across the wall like an unfinished thought. Outside, the courtyard is quiet, the faint crunch of someone's footsteps, carried up through the cold. They vanish again, swallowed by the night. The bed creaks softly when you lower yourself onto it, the frame shifting in familiar complaint. You lie down without ceremony, letting the mattress cradle your weight in its shallow, uneven way. The blanket carries the faint scent of the detergent used in the communal washroom, a clean smell that never feels entirely clean, softened by the residue of countless previous washings. You pull it over yourself, feeling the warmth settle slowly, like a hesitant guest. Your breath deepens. The hush of your room begins to merge with the steady hum of the building. each sound blending into a low muffled lull that makes your eyelids heavy. The exhaustion that followed you through the lines, through the kitchen, through the radio, gathers now behind your eyes in a wave. You close them, and the darkness comes easily. But darkness does not stay empty for long. Your mind drifts toward the familiar places it goes at the end of every day. Not places you choose, places impressed upon you by repetition, like ink pressed too firmly onto thin paper. You feel yourself walking down a corridor, though it is not a real corridor. It is built from shapes you've memorized, long walls, high ceilings, windows too far above to reach. The walls are grey, as always, but here they glow faintly, the way memories sometimes hold light, even in the dark. Machines hum in the distance, blending together into a drone that doesn't quite belong to any single piece of equipment. It isn't loud, it isn't harsh. It's steady, like a giant sleeping creature whose breath you can hear but never see. As your mind drifts deeper, the sound wraps itself around your thoughts, guiding them the way conveyor belts guide metal parts. Not forcefully, just inevitably. You walk in this imagined hallway with steps that fall without sound. The floor feels smooth beneath your feet, warmer than the factory, softer than the apartment. It's a dream version of work, stripped of its sharpness, stripped of its weight, reduced to its essence, repetition. Slogans appear along the walls, glowing with a dim phantom light. Their letters are the same ones you read on posters, near the gates in the hallways, above the entrances. Here, however, they hover slightly, as if suspended in fog. They shift gently, not enough to distort their meaning, but enough to remind you that dream logic has replaced real architecture. Words of progress, unity, achievement, all floating, as softly as dust motes. You don't read them fully, you don't need to. The meaning is the same as always. There is work, and there will always be work, and you are part of what carries it forward. Your mind moves deeper. You find yourself standing at your station again, though the machine in front of you is both familiar and unfamiliar. It shines more brightly here, edges softened, its movements smooth and almost rhythmic. You lift your hand, but the tool appears already between your fingers, as though the dream has anticipated the motion for you. The bolt before you is already in place. The next one sits ready. The next one waits. Nothing is heavy. Nothing is noisy. Everything moves the way an oil painting suggests motion, implied rather than enacted. You count without counting. Each number rises and dissolves before becoming whole. You complete tasks you don't remember starting. You adjust things that don't require adjusting. Your hands move on their own, guided by a memory of muscle memory. It is work distilled into its purest, most obedient form. Somewhere in this quiet factory of the mind, a whistle sounds. It's soft, not the brassy, sharp whistle of reality, but a faint tone carried on a breeze that shouldn't exist indoors. You turn and the hallway stretches again, leading you onward. The corridors curve slowly, like a path drawn by someone who didn't want it to end too abruptly. The posters glow, the machinery sighs. Every surface holds the faint colour of iron and paper. The air feels warm, as if heated by decades of use. It is not frightening, it is not soothing, it is simply persistent, the way a long day continues in your head, even after you lie down. Shift changes happen in your dream without people. Doors open, though no one walks through them. Lights flicker on and off, not because of electrical faults, but because your mind refuses to decide whether it is day or night. In this place, shadows move along the walls, long and thin, like tired silhouettes that have detached from their owners. You pass through another hallway, this one lined with windows. Outside, landscapes blur together, fields that dissolve into chimneys, chimneys that dissolve into streets, streets that dissolve into the faces from the portraits on the factory walls. Their expressions hover with the same calm certainty, neither approving nor condemning. Their eyes follow you, but not individually, more like a collective gaze, diffuse, omnipresent, impossible to shake. In the dream, their eyes glow faintly, not unnaturally, just enough to be noticed. Your thought drifts on, moving toward a room that resembles the canteen. Its tables stretch far beyond the edges of the walls, disappearing into haze. Bowls of soup appear before you, warm, mild, indistinguishable. Bread rests on each tray, soft-edged, too similar to separate. A long line waits behind you, yet no one breathes, no one shifts, no one clears their throat. The silence is thick, almost padded. You pick up a spoon, though the bowl remains full, no matter how many times you bring it to your mouth. You chew bread that never diminishes. The texture remains constant, like a looped memory refusing to progress. Time bends, minutes don't pass. They stretch until they become indistinguishable from seconds. You drift further into the dream, your mind slipping into a softer, more impressionistic haze. Machines and corridors blend with slogans and lines, everything merging into one continuous ribbon of work and waiting. Your thoughts begin to follow patterns that feel oddly administrative, tidy, stacked, organized. Even your dreaming seems to have accepted the discipline of quotas. You feel your breath deepen, each exhale merging with a sense of slow, distant machinery. The hum grows quieter, the posters grow dimmer, footsteps vanish. The corridor narrows until it becomes a single band of colour. The factory dissolves into the apartment dissolves into the street dissolves into a blank page. Your mind drifts into the softest layer of the night, where images lose form, and even the machinery grows too tired to continue its rhythm. You sense yourself floating inside a space where your thoughts no longer punch in or wait for instructions. A place with no slogans on the walls, no tools in your hand, no lines stretching around corners. Just the quiet hum of your own breathing, finally separate from steel and smoke. Sleep takes you gently, though not deeply. Sleep shaped by repetition, by exhaustion, by the weight of the day. Sleep that feels scheduled, structured, almost supervised. The faint hum of the building slips into your sleep before sound fully forms, a low vibration that nudges you toward waking. It rises gradually, like a fog lifting from a river, and your breath steadies in response. The room around you brightens by fractions, not with daylight, but with the pale suggestion of it, an early glow trying to seep past the frost-laced window. You feel the cool air settle against your skin, thin and metallic, a quiet reminder that dawn in this place is more temperature than light. Your eyes open slowly, resisting the transition with the gentle reluctance of someone who knows exactly what waits on the other side. The ceiling is a darker shade of grey than the walls, though in this hour the difference is barely noticeable. You lie still for a moment, letting your thoughts gather themselves in small clusters. Nothing rushes forward. Everything arrives slowly, as if respecting the delicate balance between sleep and waking. The blanket holds a faint warmth where your body pressed through the night, but the edges are cold. You shift slightly, feeling the stiffness in your spine, the residue of repetition layered across days and nights. The mattress dips beneath you in a familiar curve. It springs, sighing softly under your weight. It emits that old, predictable creak, a sound so woven into your mornings that it carries no meaning beyond acknowledgement. Your breath condenses into a ghostly cloud as you sit up. The air smells faintly of dust and the simmering heat from the radiator, which must have worked intermittently through the night. The metal pipes tick faintly as they adjust to the first demands of the day. A draft slips under the window frame, brushing your ankles with a cool whisper. Outside, the sky is still closer to night than morning. A dull band of light rests on the horizon, stretching thinly across the rooftops like a reluctant promise. The courtyard below lies quiet, coated in a thin layer of frost that glimmers weakly under the single functioning street lamp. There are no footsteps yet, No voices, just the distant hum of a tram making its earliest run along tracks that ring faintly in the cold. You dress slowly, each motion deliberate, not out of laziness, but out of precision, learned from endless repetition. You reach for your shirt, its fabric stiff from drying too close to the radiator, and pull it over your shoulders with the steady care of someone handling something both ordinary and essential. Your trousers follow, their familiar weight settling around your hips. Your fingers button them without needing to guide themselves. The room around you holds the kind of silence that does not comfort or unsettle. It simply exists alongside you. Your coat hangs near the door, its fabric worn smooth around the cuffs and slightly threadbare at the elbows. When you lift it, the weight feels exactly the same as it did yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. It settles onto your shoulders like a quiet reminder that your life too knows its routines. The boots are cold when you slip your feet into them, the leather firm from the night air. You lace them with slow, steady movements, tugging the knots tight with a small pull that resonates in your fingers, the way the first familiar step of a long walk does. When you stand, your body adjusts itself automatically, the faint lean forward, the settling of weight into your heels. You push open the door. The hallway greets you with its usual creak, a hollow echo that rolls softly down the corridor. Other doors remain closed, though you hear hints of life behind them. A kettle boiling somewhere, a cough muffled into a sleeve, the quiet shuffle of someone preparing for their own version of this morning. The collective restraint in these sounds feels like a shared language, spoken without words. Your footsteps fall lightly on the worn boards as you make your way to the stairwell. The railing is cool under your palm. The stairwell spirals downward in muted light, each step carrying you closer to the outside air. You feel the building breathe around you, its walls thick enough to hold warmth, but thin enough to remember every motion of its inhabitants. The outside world meets you with a crisp wind that slips beneath your collar. It carries the faint scent of coal smoke drifting from a chimney farther down the street. The sky has shifted to a washed-out blue, the kind that never fully brightens, no matter how long the day stretches. You inhale, letting the cold settle inside your lungs before releasing it in a slow, measured stream. You walk. The pavement glistens with frost, crunching softly beneath your boots. Buildings on either side rise like silent sentinels, tall, grey and almost interchangeable. Their windows reflect the early light in dull patches. Posters cling to their walls, slogans bold even in the dim morning. The faces printed on them hold their fixed expressions of conviction, staring outward with confidence that never fades and never deepens. Your breath escapes in steady puffs. You tuck your hands deeper into your pockets, not to conceal them, but to keep the cold from cutting into your fingers. A few other workers appear along the street, emerging from doorways and side alleys with the same slow, measured pace. No one speaks. Greeting would require energy best saved for later. The road stretches ahead, long and straight, pulling you toward the familiar intersection where several paths converge. The air fills with the soft chorus of footsteps and the occasional murmur from a person adjusting their scarf. It becomes a procession. Quiet, uniform, almost ceremonial. You turn a corner and the factories rise into view, their silhouettes stark against the uncertain sky. The chimneys send up early columns of smoke that twist in the wind. A thin warmth radiates from the machinery inside, though it never reaches beyond the walls. The buildings look unchanged, because they are. As you approach, you feel the shift within yourself. Not dread, not anticipation, but the strange acceptance that comes from knowing the day ahead will echo the one behind it. There is a certain stillness in that certainty, the calm that forms when life stops pretending to offer surprises. The gates stand open, waiting without urgency, without emotion. Workers gather in small clusters, stepping into the line with the same rhythm you've carried since waking. You join them quietly, falling into place as naturally as breath. Your hands feel heavier today, though not enough to slow your pace. Your back holds a faint ache that seems older than the week. Yet nothing aches enough to disrupt you. You move forward because movement is required, not chosen. The air inside the courtyard tastes faintly of oil and metal dust. The sky hangs low, pressing its colour onto everything it touches. You look ahead and see the workshop doors open, the interior glowing with a dim, steady light. The machinery inside groans to life, a mechanical yawn stretching into the morning. A realization settles quietly in your mind. Not loud, not dramatic, just present in the simplest form. You will walk this path again tomorrow. The thought does not crush you. It does not ignite anger. It lies in you the way cold lies in stone, naturally, silently, inevitably. The future doesn't unfold like a horizon, expanding with possibilities. It stretches like a corridor you already know, long and dim and lined with the same familiar walls. Your feet continue forward. The morning air presses thinly against your face. The factory waits, the way it always does. You inhale once more, slow, steady, as if preparing to step back into the shape your life has carved. There is no ceremony in the motion, no surprise in the silence, no resistance in your steps. Just another day beginning exactly where the last one left off. A cycle so complete, so practiced, that even your thoughts move along its rails without protest. And as you cross the threshold into the factory's light, the dim corridor of the future stretches quietly in front of you, expecting your footsteps, ready to receive them, exactly as it did yesterday. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Rich Davis, and Leslie Schofield. Sleep well.